presence which is near. And it's wonderful that he anticipates, I think, a very contemporary concern we now face with the climate change issues, about how we care about the environment. Here's an artist who drew on inspiration of Aboriginal art as well. And here he has the Eucharistic symbols and bird references and the natural world around us. He's very calming and a very calm person. He only passed away a couple of years ago, a great Australian artist, and here you can see his influence with Aboriginal art. Now John had a wonderful opportunity when he was a young artist to do a commission. It's such a poverty in our religious traditions that few artists are actually asked to do works in churches or synagogues or other religious places. And here John, he knew the local priest down here in DY in Sydney. This is St Kevin's. I hadn't realised that St Kevin, I guess he must be an Australian saint, having the name Kevin. DY in 1960, 1959, this building was put up, a ferro-concrete building with 7 peak roofs, actually like a tent structure, very innovative piece of work. And John and his wife Barbara got down on their hands and knees and crushed tiles from a kitchen display, and the congregation walked in over these marks on the floor every Sunday, and they're still there to this day. He also designed these grill steel work here on the chapel on the side. It's DY, it's the beach, so it's a wonderful evocation of the place. These Stations of the Cross. This is the Good News Bible that just been published, so there was that kind of tradition of simple graphics. But what is a worry, it's a mainly Italian parish now, and they have different tastes. And so certain statues have crept back in, and plastic flowers are everywhere. So some things change and some things stay the same. Inspired by that example, I had the opportunity to work in the church I was minister of at Paddington. I got a major grant from the Australia Council to commission 6 artists to create work within the environment of the church. Because I was the minister, and it was my last year in the church, I got away with this. And I was able to take out all the furniture and turn the church for 6 months into a continual exhibition space in which we worshipped week by week. Miley T is a Vietnamese artist. She's a refugee. She's been working with shoes. She said when she arrived in Australia, she looked at her feet most of the time. She was too shy or ashamed to engage people with her eyes. And with this curiosity of looking at shoes, she began to talk to people, borrow their shoes or have shoes given to her as gifts. And in the middle of the church, as you walked in, you could smell old shoe leather. What a wonderful incense. I hope God was well pleased. This is 10 years ago, and it was about then we were beginning to discuss this thing about boat people and how we deal with people beyond our borders. Around the edge, her partner Tim Johnson also had work which referred to Buddhist ideas and Hindu ideas. And here you have 2 paper sculptures of bones, 2 artists about to paint themselves into life. So here you have an attempt to create artwork in an environment where people begin to question. Where are the places people go to in public life to bring their questions about their life, their ethics, moral dilemmas, to live their life in a body? And so in this period, as an art gallery or as a sacred space, or both, this was a wonderful opportunity to play with these ideas. John Adair, very influenced by Jewish mysticism, created a large box inside the church, 5 cubits high, 5 cubits wide, and 15 cubits long. Now you all know those measurements. This is the tabernacle, the tent, that the ancient Jews trudged around with and installed every time they had a stop for a few weeks. His idea was that it appeared in its correct orientation east during the period of the Feast of Tabernacles, where Orthodox Jews would be out on the verandas in temporary coverings. A great big box in the church, what was that about? And then you went inside and he turned his paintbrush around. With the end of it, he poked holes in the black plastic, creating this mysterious star-like interior. My goodness. I heard more confessions in there than I heard anywhere else. People were just enthralled with the intimate wonder of this space inside the church. And this work of crushed marble by Rachael Kohn, which reflected the light. This is September 11th. This is the week that the attacks occurred in the United States, where buildings were reduced to rubble. On the morning that this happened, a woman came into the church who was on holidays in Sydney from Boston, and she wrote in the book that here in this rubble she saw the hope of renewal. This artist is influenced by Japanese Zen spirituality, the Rake Gardens in Japan. What's it doing inside a church? It's making connections. And this work of felt, elaborate on the floor, hanging images. All this work of sheer curtains and acidic colour, melting forms on the pulpit instead of a preacher. The church as a curtain, torn apart the space of the body. And this work of an 1877 lighthouse flashing inside a building that was built in 1877. So this project offered some opportunity to create sacred space and to use art in its own integrity as a way of illuminating that connection about what it is to be a body and where you come from and where you're going. And in conclusion, I want to offer another artist and another perspective, George Giddos, who has a number of works, I believe, at Mandorla. He's Australia's most well-known war artist. If John Coburn is the priest, then George Giddos is the prophet, and he knows nothing sacred that he will not question. Here is his winning work, Blake Prize in 1995, The Preacher, in the middle of an eyewitness situation in Rwanda, watching thousands of people being murdered in front of him as part of an Australian peacekeeping effort. He had to watch and just not get involved as a UN peacekeeper. He came across this young man who was reading the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus' words, "Blessed are you when you're a peacemaker," etc. He said in the midst of all this most terrible situation he'd ever found in his life, there was someone who was reminding people that they were human. What is it to be religious? It's to be human, to have compassion. And so in this body of work, there he is in Afghanistan. He's committed to go to places where people are disfigured, where life is torn apart, and to probe the questions of what it is to be human in those places. People had come to this place on the first anniversary of the Rwandan Civil War, believing that either the UN peacekeeping forces would protect them and they would be safe. Rwanda is a Christian country where 1/10 of the population was murdered by their neighbours in a period of a couple of hundred days. And why? Why does that happen? Why does that continue to happen in our present history? And how does God care for bodies? So I might just leave it there, perhaps with that image, placing that alongside John Coburn. Religious art reminds us of the utter beauty of being human, the delight that we feel from the bottom of our toes to the top of our head, the joy of being alive. But it also brings us into a territory of edges and questions and makes us perhaps shake up the stability of what we believe on. I like both gestures. I like art to challenge me. I like artists to stretch my capacity to think and feel, and also to comfort me and bring me back to the centre. I think that's healthy, to live a life both in the centre and at the edge.
Thank you very much, Rod. Judy, could you please now turn on the lights? Rachael is Canadian-born and graduated with an MA and PhD in Religious Studies from McMaster University and was awarded the prestigious Leverhulme postdoctoral fellowship when she took up the University of Lancaster in England. Before joining the ABC in 1992, she taught religious studies at Sydney University and in universities in England and Canada. Rachael was, in 2005, awarded a Doctorate of Letters from the University of New South Wales for her services to community, for fostering religious understanding through her broadcasts, public speaking, and her book, The New Believers, Reimagining God, by HarperCollins. She's recently published Curious Obsessions in the History of Science and Spirituality with ABC Books in 2007. She's won 3 gold medals from the New York Festival's International Radio Competition and has produced documentaries for ABC TV's Compass on the Dead Sea Scrolls, Buddhism East and West, and Pause for Thought, that is spelled P-A-W-S. It's about the spirituality of animals. She currently presents The Spirit of Things on ABC Radio, and if any of you have been listening, there have been some very beautiful stories, particularly one that was very moving that I listened to last week. And it's a project that she's running on the monthly series called My Spiritual Diary, where she has notable Australians, such as the beautiful flautist Jane Rutter and Moira Rayner, who is a campaigner for justice. They keep a diary over a month and then share it with Rachael and the listeners. And the listeners have responded very warmly to this series and to the way they make deep spiritual connections that are woven through their lives, both those on the radio and the response of the listeners' own lives and spirituality. Rachael has an abiding interest in the way in which the arts themselves are an expression of our spirituality, as we've just heard through Rod, as the expression through the body. And Rachael, we're also pleased to hear from you on Twitter that you feel privileged to be here for the Slattery lecture and to be a judge. And as we know, this extraordinary way that our world works in contemporary social media has taken a different turn for us all. So we welcome you to Western Australia and to be part of both of these events. So we welcome Dr. Rachael Kohn.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here, and I have to say, I had an unexpected epiphany this evening. George Kitto's painting has always stayed with me from the time I first saw it many years ago. And tonight I understood why it had such a deep resonance. Some of you may know the most famous image from the Holocaust. And it's a boy. It's a boy with his hands up like that, with fear in his eyes. That was just emblazoned there, so many decades later, in another situation of complete horror. And I just saw those two images together in a way I never imagined until this evening. Well, as you heard, no images. They have to be up here, I'm afraid. And I've approached this the way I do each week. I write scripts and I write things, so I have written something for this evening. So I'm glad you were able to have the experience of extemporaneous commentary by Rod with pictures. Now, a bit of an essay on this topic of the soul of art. And I started with Nicolas Poussin's painting called The Golden Calf. which depicts the Israelites in a debauched state of dance around a prominent image, a calf, golden and elevated, but inert and utterly devoid of moral force. The revelers have forgotten the great mission of Moses, and in impatience satisfied their personal lust for the physical pleasures of worship for its own sake. Answerable nonetheless to a higher law that points to the reality beyond their sensory desires, the writhing humanity in Poussin's painting is depicted in an eerie light that portends doom. A desperate rite overtakes them, and the true meaning of God's relationship to the world is forgotten. Momentarily, they have lost their soul, but not the possibility of redemption. For this is but a stage in the unfolding story of the Bible, which, like Poussin's painting, points the way to God's saving grace, just as it reveals humanity's faltering efforts to keep the faith. The pride of Aaron and the voluptuous allure of his priestly cult are contrasted to the pathos of a rejected Moses, whose only gift to the Israelites was a covenant with an unseen God and the promise of a distant land. In our day, the transcendent God has taken a beating, just as it did back in Moses' time, and repeatedly since then. Indeed, the Christian church chose to believe in a God made flesh, while retaining belief in the Holy Spirit and God the Father. When the fullness of time had come, God sent his Son, born of a woman, under the law. The Israelites, on the other hand, preferred to keep it simple. One transcendent God who gave instructions to all Israel on how to fulfill his requirements in daily life. Well, when I say the Israelites kept it simple, let me rephrase that. There is nothing simple in the world of gods and men. Over time, religious traditions express humanity's intense desire to create anew its relationship to the divine, to reimagine it in ways that satisfy one's whole being: physical, intellectual, emotional, social, as well as aesthetic dimensions. Both Jews and Christians have been doing that for millennia. To reimagine is to think on something that is partly hidden. The transcendent God is that, but it's a hiddenness that is not thought of as entirely removed from our pitiable lives on earth. Not since Jacob struggled with the angel, or Job sent